Director General in the Ministry of the Environment, Climate and Sustainable Development in Luxembourg. Then Mr. Norbert Gorissen, Deputy Director General in the Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation and Nuclear Safety, the BMU from Germany. And Norbert has to leave us at 11:55, but thank you for joining us for this event. Next, Dr. Heike Henn, Director for Climate and Energy, Sustainable Urban Development and Environment in the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, the BMZ of Germany. Then Jürgen Vogler, Vice President for Sustainable Development from the World Bank, and Ambroise Fayol, Vice President from the European Investment Bank. Thank you all for being with us today. And first of all, let me turn to you, Dr. Weidenhaupt. Tell us firstly why cities and climate a priority for Luxembourg, and how did the GAP Fund come into being, and how does its mission align with your national climate action and investment strategy and international aid objectives? Over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks all of you to be our audience. Welcome, also in the virtual sphere. How it came to Luxembourg, or how we got on board. On board is the right word. It was on a boat trip in Helsinki that Carsten Zach approached me and said, well, we are developing an instrument for local authorities, and that it has always been an issue for you in Luxembourg as well. Wouldn't you be willing to be on board? And I'm very grateful to Germany that you approached us on this, because I think we have developed since then, that was 2 years ago, a very adequate instrument that had already its first success stories. We have been shown by the video, and I'm very glad of that. Yes, half of the population of the world lives in cities, and according to the UN, 68% of the world population will live in cities by 2050. And cities nowadays cover 70% of greenhouse gas emissions. So there's a huge impact of the cities, but there are also huge challenges. For instance, the need of new infrastructures, energy, housing, social imbalances, obviously, air pollution, water scarcity, and so on. And I think we need to develop these more green, more sustainable, more climate adapted. Further efforts are needed in urban climate-friendly infrastructure, in building partnerships and create concrete, innovative ways of financing. I think the City of Climate Finance GAP Fund is one of these. We all agree that there's a global need in cities and infrastructure projects. Luxembourg's international climate finance strategy that has been adopted by the government end of July of this year targets climate and environment projects with high impact, and at the same time seeks for new ways of financing, including the mobilization of private funding. City administrations often lack the capacity and funding to prepare projects from rough concepts to a stage where they can at least be picked up by project preparation facilities. This is a real bottleneck for key urban climate finance projects, and this is where the City Climate Finance GAP Fund comes in. The GAP Fund will provide a facility for early stage project support to cities who turn ideas based on their climate action plans into robust project business cases. And this is what Luxembourg is seeking, and somehow in terms of Luxembourg we have a good experience with local authorities. We have launched a climate pact already in 2013. That was volunteer, but all municipalities joined, and we are now in phase 2 of that, and we see the City Climate Finance GAP Fund somehow as going globally of this instrument. The GAP Fund will remove one of the major barriers cities face in building low carbon and climate resilient infrastructure. I think this is what we are all looking for, and last but not least, we need private investors to even scale up our activities in this fund. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, and that chimes very much with what we've heard from across the Global Covenant network as well, both around the need, but also really around that key gap in advancing projects towards investment. Next to come to you, Mr. Corison, tell us about, similarly from the German perspective for you, from BMU, why are cities and climate a priority, and how does the Gap Fund mission align with your objective investment
from
the German side?
Thank you very much for organizing this event, and also I'm very glad to be again here in this Benelux/EIB pavilion, which I think is a very good initiative to have this joint effort. Nice to be here, and I'm also very glad about this partnership, which is a little bit unique. On the one hand, we have the two ministries, BMZ and BMU, Development, Cooperation and Environment, working closely together. We have two multilateral development banks, the World Bank and the EIB, and we have our good friends, a small country but a very committed country, Luxembourg, involved in that. I think that is unique and has proven to be a very, very good basis for projects like that. This all comes back to 2019, to the Global Action Summit organized by the Secretary General, where cities had been one of the subjects to dive deeper. And as Andre already has explained, cities are crucial for climate action. They are also very vulnerable. I guess Heike will perhaps talk about that aspect even more. And cities are sometimes forgotten by national government to receive the right kind of support. And that's exactly where the Cities Climate Gap Fund comes in, to provide cities with the assistance to be able to pair projects which then could reach a level of project preparation which could attract the usual investors. So I also would like to name the city networks, which are also part of this partnership. So GCOM is moderating this event today. ICLA is also part of that, C40 and the City Climate Finance Leadership Alliance. That is a complicated, huge partnership, and we were able to put it all together in one address, one shop to go, and that's the City Climate Gap Fund. And I'm very pleased to see that it has already attracted many cities to ask for support, and that the Gap Fund is already operational and already provided some support. So thanks a lot. Looking forward to good outcomes.
Thank you very much for that. And to come to you, Dr. Hen, from the BMZ perspective, tell us a bit about how the Gap Fund aligns with your priorities and strategy, and around BMZ's engagement with the fund so far.
Thank you very much. We just nice chairs you have. I'm really happy to be here. And the Gap Fund is really important to us, and I think the presence of two German ministries here, not only the presence, but that they invest money in the fund, shows that we are really committed. And from my perspective, colleagues already mentioned the cities as a hotspot where the decarbonization has to happen, and that's certainly the case. Not only looking at the emissions now, but also looking at the future and the rise in population and urbanization. But cities are also a hotspot for adaptation regarding the effects and the rising costs and human life of climate events. And cities are the place where development needs to happen. Growth, green growth and prosperity, where the SDGs have to come true for rising population. And therefore, for BMZ, Economic Cooperation and Development, the involvement in cities, the Cities Gap Fund is really key for what we say in also different contexts, that if we want to achieve the Paris Agreement, we have to achieve the SDGs and vice versa. We cannot have one without the other, and that is especially visible in cities. And therefore, when we came up with our now new strategy on climate and energy in the ministry in September, for the first time, we put sustainable urbanization, sustainable development in cities at the top of our climate and energy agenda. It's one of 3 action areas, and we have also already received a huge interest of our partner countries and our colleagues in the ministry of this topic. So this is really crucial for us moving forward, to have the buy-in of countries. And this is something that signifies, from my perspective, also the GAP Fund, because it's based on the ownership of cities that come up with their ideas for investments in sustainable mobility, circular economy, housing, construction sector, something where I see a high potential also to attract private investment moving forward, but they come with their own suggestions, and then the GAP Fund addresses the gap of early project development to make the idea become a bankable project. Because, like we all say, we want to put Article 2.1c of the Paris Agreement in practice. We want to shift the trillions, but the trillions are already too slow, but they are shifting, and they are looking for bankable projects. And if the GAP Fund can make this happen, this early stage development, the pre-feasibility studies, then the leverage of the 100 million we want to achieve within the fund, that then leverage 2 billion more, that is not just a fantasy to attract other development partners, but that has really a chance to deliver due to the bankability of really high rate of return investment projects in cities. And therefore, the 2 ministries are happy to be part of this important partnership and are looking forward to attract more interest from others. Over to you, Andy.
Thank you so much for those comments. Very helpful, very clear also from many city leaders that indeed they are looking to address multiple objectives and really deliver on multiple of the SDGs and deliver the multiple benefits of climate action for their citizens, and very much appreciate those points, as well as the important issues around making the links through to the formal negotiation side of things, and opportunities on climate finance. So thank you for those remarks. Next to come to our 2 implementing agencies for the GAP Fund. First to you, Vice President Vogler. Tell us more about the World Bank's work on the GAP Fund, and perhaps share a few examples of projects that have been approved for support and are being delivered by in association with World Bank.
Great. First of all, super to be here. Thank you for inviting the World Bank to this conversation. And my first shout out goes to the German government, because for more than a year ago, they already had a clear vision, saying if we want to be really impactful and accelerate investments in cities in a way that is transformational, we need to bridge that gap of funding. Many cities don't have plans yet. Many cities do have plans yet. But 6,150 cities as of this moment around the world already have climate investment plans. But that's only 20% of the population. There's tens of thousands of cities more that will need support. And it was very clear that there is a gap between their ambition and their ability to transact and translate this into concrete action. And I remember talking with Norbert in the ministry more than a year ago, and was saying, should we set up a trust fund? How would this work? Is this too small? And I have to say, this is not a huge fund. This is demand-driven. As we've seen in the movie, it. So this is an instrument, it's a tool at the right time in the right place. And it does two things, basically. It helps those cities that are not ready, that don't have a plan yet, they don't have a clear vision yet, to get their act together. And it helps those others that already have, those 6,000 that already have a clear plan, to be very specific about, how do we get nature-based solutions, for instance, into our trajectory. Kinshasa, DRC, you asked for some examples, that's what we are doing with that government. Or you look at the energy efficiency in building, if that's the gap. So we work with cities there. So, or any of the challenges that those cities face. So I like both the flexibility of the instrument, the practicality of it, and the ease of transaction, so which many funds don't have. So from our side, this is an excellent instrument, an excellent tool, and we are proud and delighted to work together with EIB, our partners, on this. Good example, actually, of how multilateral development makes think alike, work alike, and share the common space together with our donors and partners. Put the funding in. So great initiative. There's 100% support of the whole thing. I believe, and I believe this will continue to grow. This is not a one-off. This is the cities will need this going forward. So this is here to stay. Thanks, and back to you.
Thank you very much, and very pleased from the GCOM side to hear that GAP Fund and similar instruments are here to stay. And very much agree with you on supporting cities that are at very different stages of their climate action journey, as you noted, in kind of both completing some of those plans, in integrating some of those elements around resilience adaptation and data-based solutions, and other issues in there. And indeed, from the operational perspective, has been great to see World Bank and European working together so closely to support city climate action. So then to turn to you, Vice President Fayol, tell us more about the European Investment Bank's work on the GAP Fund, and perhaps indeed give us some examples of projects that are being pursued for support by the European Investment Bank.
Well, good morning, and let me start by saying how pleased we are to have this event in the Benelux EIB pavilion. This is something we have done over the last COPs. EIB is located in Luxembourg, so it is really part of Benelux, and we are here with key partners for us. Of course, the government of Luxembourg, Germany, and also the World Bank, which is one of our key MDB ally in trying to deal with climate issues. What I would say is two things. One, I very much agree with actually all the panelists who said we are trying here to deal with a key issue when you want to fight climate and environment. The way we are going to be able or not to help cities, especially in developing countries, to develop plans, because you need an integrated approach to do that. There are issues related to transport, to energy, to water, to wastewater. You need really an integrated approach. And it's going to be key in delivering the climate targets. And at the same time, there are instruments for project preparation, which are needed actually, but it is true that there are not much instruments for early stage in the preparation. And that is actually what the GAP Fund is looking at, and this is why it is so interesting. And the second thing that I think is very much valuable is the partnership. I mean, it's a clear partnership with our friends from the Luxembourg government, the German government. I mean, GIZ is the operating partner of EIB in implementing the GAP Fund, and the World Bank clearly is also a key partner for us, and maybe we'll come back to that in a minute. So for that reason, also, I think it is very much a welcome initiative, and I really think there is a gap here that needs to be filled. Now, if you want just a few examples of projects on which we provide technical assistance together with Gateshead, with the German cooperation. Let me give you 3 examples in 3 different regions. One in Ukraine, in the city of Vinnytsia, where we are working on analyzing the potential to integrate climate change adaptation measures alongside the Bug River, such as new green spaces along the embankments and walking routes across the city. And again, you see the link with question of adaptation, which is also a big component of this COP26. The second example is in the city of Danane in Côte d'Ivoire. So you see that these are not necessarily for big cities; it's also for smaller ones that can benefit from this. Where the GAP Fund will carry out a preliminary analysis on the deployment of a fleet of 600 low-carbon, low-cost solar tricycle taxis to meet the city's most pressing mobility needs for people and cargo. And finally, in Montenegro, Podgorica, this is a very interesting project that we are developing actually, where we are assessing for public buildings which ones are the ones who could receive green roofs. And that's something that also could help reach their ambition and targets for that. But then you need to look also at how you increase the permeability of public space surfaces, and that's the kind of issues where actually the earlier you start the project, the better it's going to be in the implementation. So I'll stop there, but really a great initiative.
Thank you so much for those remarks. Very helpful to hear those practical examples. And we will point people to the website in some closing remarks when we get towards the end of the event, just to be able to pick up some more information and to read some more. So we've got a round of quickfire questions, and then we will come to the floor in the room with a roving microphone just for any questions from our audience. But very quickly, just to come back to you, Dr. Hen, what motivated the donors to create this collaborative fund where World Bank and EIB are co-implementers?
Yeah, thank you, Andy. I think some colleagues already commented on the history of the fund coming into being, and it was exactly the focus on cities, the need to see more investments in cities for this transformation towards decarbonization we need, and an analysis of how cities can obtain funding or what ways they don't have, and where could be a gap. So the analysis was that regarding more advanced projects and then facilities who support quite robust project ideas, that there was no need for a new instrument. And I think from the German side, for us, it's very important that we try to increase efficiency in what we are doing and coherence, and not come up with a new instrument every single time, but identify really the gaps. And the second issue I would like to mention that came already up in colleagues' remarks is that to make something happen, you need also a political momentum. You need the UN Climate Week, or you need Glasgow to really pull partners together and create the political will to put money on the table, to seek partners out and to get something moving. So it was the topic and the opportunity, the momentum that led us together.
Great, thank you so much for those remarks. Vice President Fayolle, practically, how does that World Bank and European Investment Bank collaboration work in practice? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, first, the World Bank and EIB are two key pillars of the MDB community. So we work together on many projects. We co-finance many projects. We work on many policies together. We try on the climate thing in particular. There is a lot of work that is done by our experts that is reflected in many initiatives that have been taken on climate tracking, on a lot of what we need to do as a group of multilateral development banks to implement the climate ambition. In this particular initiative, what I find very interesting is that it is really the co-production, if I may say so. It is. I mean, of course, there are two different multi-donor trust funds. One is managed by the World Bank, one is managed by EIB, but it is really thought as a sort of one-gap stop shop, if I may say so. And for example, we have two donors committees, but in the donor committee of the World Bank, EIB is represented, and in the donor committee of EIB, the World Bank is represented. And we also try to, when we screen the applications that come, we do that together. So I mean, it's really yes, a co-production of our two institutions. Because I think the two institutions recognize that the high value of this new fund.
Thank you so much. And I know Mr. Gorissen has to leave us in a few minutes, so maybe just very quickly to come to you. So as we've heard, the GAP Fund recently celebrated its first anniversary, keeping in mind those achievements from the past year that we've seen in the video and we've heard from our panelists. Where do you see growing potential?
Thank you for the question. I would name three areas. The first one, just reflecting on this partnership, I think, and that goes far beyond on the GAP Fund. I think it would be very, very good to have more of these kind of collaborations, because recipient countries, partners in developing countries, they're really struggling with the complexity of finance tracks they should attach. So here we have two institutions. Each of them have their own procedures, and you just named it, two boards. But I think for the cities who are applying for the GAP Fund, this is not visible. It's a one-shop stop, and that's exactly what we need. So when they want to achieve support, they can go to that website, and how it is done internally, divided between EIB and World Bank, is not really something they have to matter about. I think that is an example how cooperation between different institutions with different shareholders, different setups could continue. I think that's what we really need to do to support the implementation of the Paris Agreement. Coming to the GAP Fund specifically, I'm quite sure that the quality and the ambition of the project proposal will come and will increase over time. Once the fund is better known, what it can do, what it can support, once cities realize that they need to be even more ambitious, reflecting the emerging outcomes of this conference, reflecting the many net zero plans we have. I heard a huge number of cities which have committed to net zero. Meanwhile, I think that will certainly also improve the quality and the ambition of the project. And my third point would be, and Heike mentioned that already, is adaptation. I'm sure will become even more a focus for the cities, because they will realize the impacts of how the impacts of climate change, of the climate crisis, will hit them, and they will seek what they can do in order to better address that. So those would be my three expectations. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry that I had to leave now, but thanks for this good event.
No, thank you so much for the contributions, and look forward to continuing to work with you as the GAP Fund continues to grow. Thank you very much. Then just to build on some of those remarks there around the one-stop shop approach, to come to you, Vice President Vogler, how does the GAP Fund complement other initiatives such as the World Bank City Resilience Programme, the EBRD Green Cities Programme, or C40 Cities Finance Facility?
The question, can you hear me now? Okay, this is better. So first of all, reflecting back on what we've heard from the other panelists, the international finance architecture is very fragmented. It's a big issue for our clients to be able to have a one-stop window into something that they want to have solved. So we at the World Bank, and I'm sure it's the same for the European Investment Bank, we're very hesitant to embark on yet another trust fund that is small, that picks a piece out of the broader development architecture. So we're very hesitant, and we scrutinize this really carefully. And our general reaction is maybe not. Maybe we'll fold it into something else. For this one, we made an exception, because we really felt that, and I think it's not only true for cities, there is generally a huge problem with having funding very early on, before anything is decided, before projects are in place. There is just a total gap. It's the same with the pandemic preparedness and prevention, for instance. There is basically no money out there to prevent the next pandemic. There is a lot of money to respond to the pandemic. And even some preparedness is out there, but prevention is not there. And I think this is a little bit of a similar kind of discussion. This is a true gap beyond cities in the international climate finance architecture to have money ready for governments who are willing to do something, but don't get the first step done. So this is the reason why we really like this instrument and why we made this, in a way, it's almost an exception. And we also really enjoy the collaboration with the EIB, and hopefully over time we can bring everyone else in the MDB community into the fold on this, so that we can demonstrate. This is not about us, it's about the client. If the client has a need, they need to be able to come to us as multilateral development banks and get a solution. And we are demonstrating, and this is not the only one, we work together in many ways, as Ambroise says. I mean, this is not visible to the outside world. But we are involved on a daily basis with each other's technical teams, whether it's on how we align for Paris, how on the gender dimension. I mean, you name it. All of these things we interact very closely together. That's at the sort of analytical and policy level, but also in implementation. Now, increasingly, we do things together. So I like that part a lot. And, are there other instruments out there, City Resilience Fund and others? Absolutely. But our teams are the same team. So they use this instrument like a menu. So when a city comes and says, here is our problem, our teams will then knock their heads together and say, maybe this is not for the GAP fund, maybe that's for the City Resilience Fund, or maybe that's for yet another climate fund. And I think that's a real improvement and advancement in the way we operate as providers of support to our clients. So I hope it will evolve further in this direction. Maybe just one final note. I don't know how about you, Ambroise, and you, but in the last 12 months, I've been in many panels with city mayors. It's unusual because it's just been many events where city mayors come together and talk. Typically, certainly at the World Bank, we interact with national governments and talk national policy. Sometimes that's not so dynamic, let me put it that way. When you sit on a panel with 3 or 4 city mayors from cities around the world, there is fire in there, right? They typically want to get things done, they want to move. They have a constituency that is in their face every single day, right? So I find it extremely inspiring. And I think cities I increasingly realize that cities are the ones that will drive climate change policy and climate change investment going forward, even more than some governments who have to get everybody aligned. And you will see real brilliant examples. And I've just come across many where I go like, wow, right? If that city can inspire 10 other cities or the national government, we are on the move. I'm based in the United States, and you can imagine, right? But after the last 4 years, there wasn't a lot going on at the national level government, but cities were like out there. Nature-based solutions, all really moving the initiatives along. So very inspiring, and I certainly feel at the World Bank, and probably it's true for the EIB, we will. It's not our core mandate to work with cities directly, but we will do whatever we can to harness, galvanize, catalyze these activities, and then hopefully get them onto the national level. That's kind of how I also see, if you want, a spin-off of the city's GAP fund, because ideas will come out of it that we can then have at our national dialogue.
Thank you so much. You might have seen me smiling away in the background there, and we might quote you on some of that, on the important role and the leadership that cities have been demonstrating in recent times. Indeed, sometimes in collaboration with national governments, but important to really demonstrate that action being taken and is aligning and driving ambition for all levels of government. So really, thank you for those remarks. And then to come to you, Dr. Weidenhaupt, so the GAP Fund is looking to reach 100 million. Who are the current partners and who can contribute?
Yes, we are moving to the 100 million. I think we have reached more than half of it. So still looking for partners to join. Until now, we have 10 partners, so that's the three ministries that have been mentioned, the two German federal ministries of economic development and cooperation. I think that's the correct wording. The Federal Ministry of the Environment. They have some other words in it, but I would skip them. And then the Luxembourg Ministry for of the Environment, Climate and Sustainable Development, with the two multilateral banks that are sitting on the panel with me, EIB and the World Bank, then GIZ as the one-stop shop that has already been addressed as well. And then we have 4 local partner organizations, the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy being one of these 4. So basically this sets the scene on what partners we are looking for to join, but obviously we also need partners that would bring money on the table. There had already been preliminary discussions with some potential new partners. The fund has now completed the first year of its operations. We have seen that we have many of applications, so things are getting concrete. And I think then we are now at a crucial moment of time where it is very easy, at least to my mind, to convince others to join this initiative, because we have now showcases to tell. We have this one-stop shop, which I think is also a standing alone, somehow lighthouse to attract those that want to bring projects in. So I think we have some merits that make this fund unique, and I think it's the crucial moment in time for others to join. Anyway, we need them, because this will allow the private investors to boost up onto towards the 4 billion that Heike has already mentioned as well, that we are targeting to mobilize in a way to help cities to get more sustainable, to help them to get their climate action being put into action, and also, let's say, to leave no one behind also when it comes to social imbalances.
Thank you so much. Very clear, and a key opportunity for other partners who are interested. And we'll say a little bit more in a few moments about how to directly get in touch. But if you're there in the room, then do please take the chance to speak to a panelist or engage with some of the on-site team after the events. Now comes the part where we test my virtual moderation skills to the limit. I believe there's a roving microphone in the room, and perhaps some of the panelists can help me out just to see whether if people on the floor would like to raise hands, perhaps if there's a question or two from those present on the floor in the room there.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thanks. Great, thanks. My name is Ann Vaughn. I work for the U.S. Agency for International Development. Thank you so much for the presentation. We're releasing a draft climate change strategy for comment, but I can assure you anything that we're doing on climate change is focusing on inclusion and making sure we're helping some of the most vulnerable communities adapt. And I'd be real interested to hear how you're making sure funds are being targeted within city, like with the plans that come forward. Is there screening? Exactly your last point about making sure we're leaving no one behind. How are you practically doing that to make sure that the plans and programs are addressing inequity and other issues that really, when we know politics and adaptation in cities, some of it is very political where funds can go. So how do you make sure that you're supporting those that maybe are most climate vulnerable? Thank you.
Can I ask the second one? So I'll ask my question. I'm Nancy Sage. I'm the Chief Climate Change Expert from the EIB. And I've been listening to you all, and it's very wonderful to see you all talking about the GAP Fund. I remember the initial discussions about it. I'd like to just ask a question about the least developed countries and the SIDS, and just say, is there a specific challenge? We've been talking about this need for this very upstream engagement, but is there a specific challenge working with cities from the least developed countries who are really, in terms of their emissions, are probably still behind some of perhaps the bigger middle income countries? They have their very specific challenges, and yet in some cases, of course, they're very, very fast expanding cities. So it's a question about, is there a different way that you need to approach the cities in LDCs, or is there a specific challenge for cities in LDCs?
Thank you. Do we want to make a start with those two? Which of our panelists wants to come in first?
Right, so let me get started, and then you all can complement. First of all, how do we make sure that it helps those who need the help the most? This is an open menu approach. So the city comes and says, doesn't matter which stage, whether you're a really poor city or you're a middle income city, and says, we don't know what to do, right? This is sort of the base case. Like, oh my God, we got to get climate smart. What does it take? We then engage across all levels. Spatial planning, the whole typical city planning, but also the social part of this, right? So we have a huge program in our urban team around slum regeneration, neighborhood regeneration. In fact, right now under this GAP fund, if USAID, when you have an opportunity, how do you determine what are the interventions, right? And we have, of course, the more technical intervention sides and the more policy intervention sides, but then also the real sort of social inclusion scenario. I have a very good, I don't know whether it was under this GAP fund, but the city of Tirana, I was in several events with the mayors of Tirana, and when they speak, it actually you remember. So the city of Tirana mayor, she said how they really changed the inclusiveness of their city design and city planning deliberately, and how it changed the price of property, how it changed the whole dynamics in the city. So this type of interaction is what we do with our teams. And GIZ, of course, has a lot of experts on this as well. So don't assume that there is sort of a blueprint that we say, okay, we do this and this and this, but we can't talk about social. It's clearly very important. And sorry, what was your...
LDC.
Oh, the LDCs. Well, as I said, right? So you'd be surprised, right? So the city, Liberia, Freetown, not exactly a middle-income country. One of the mayor of Freetown is an absolutely incredible woman. She's in many panels around, will fully understand why this GAP fund is so critical. She says, I got 52 things that I need to focus on. I got a plan for about 30 of them. I got funding for 12 of them. I have no idea what I'm going to do with these 3. She's literally that organized. She's totally clear what that city, what the vision is. Can you help us here, and here? Because that's where we feel you have the expertise. So this is a very interactive type of thing. And frankly, there is no blueprint. Every city is different. Every city has different challenges, different capacity, different governance, government capabilities. I just think this instrument has the flexibility to be responsive. And I think that's why we like it.
And basically, if I may add to this, I think most have been said from the colleague from World Bank. We have, when we decided to join, we had also brought forward these type of criteria because Luxembourg's climate finance has very severe criteria when it comes to inclusiveness and other issues. So we had a scrutiny on this, and it resulted in a results framework that has been set up when we set up this instrument. And this is also, let's say, one of the results is that we have the joint 3 partners in the one-stop shop Jürgen Friedrich just described. I think GIZ from his terrain expertise, the 2 banks that are with us, EIB and the World Bank. I think that makes sure, and that was also to join in and to be part of this journey.
I can just add one point to this. I mean, one of the beauties of this particular instrument is that it doesn't have a set of menus that you can do and you can't do other things. If the decision is to do purely a social inclusion program for that city, we can do that. And that's why I really like that. So there's really a choice there.
But it's clear that when we have requests from cities, I mean, cities do include this consideration about social inclusion as part of what they expect from us to deliver. And more broadly, I agree completely with what Jürgen said. More broadly, what we do is in any way we include this in our approaches. This is what we call the concept of just transition, and we know that the transition will not be successful if it is not just. It's valid not only for poor countries; it's valid also for the rich countries in Europe. So it's a key element of our strategy.
Thank you so much for those responses to the questions. And indeed, also from the Global Covenant side, increasingly integrating work on energy access and energy poverty into our work with cities, and also using that to seek to drive towards action on just climate transition, and look forward to continuing to see what other projects, not only in those areas, but across that whole spectrum of topics that we've discussed today, continue to come forward through the GAP Fund. And hopefully we've made clear that, I mean, the fund really is filling a gap. And as you've heard from a number of the panelists, contains that flexibility to be able to respond in the right way and to the context then within individual cities. So perhaps just in a few words from each of our panelists, why should partners partner with the GAP Fund and join with us all to build on that work that's already underway?
Shall I start? Jürgen was asking me. Oh, sorry. Because the GAP Fund is such an innovative, agile instrument that enables us, if we can join forces, to get ahead of the growth curve of urbanization happening, especially in least developed countries when we look at Africa or South Asia. So this is really an efficient instrument for action that we are talking about so much here in Glasgow.
If I may continue, so I completely join what Heike Henna said, but I would also say another reason is because local action is so important and city action is so important. And I think if the figures will be confirmed in 2050, I think if we don't have instruments like the City Climate Finance Gap Fund, we might lack with climate action at city level. And I think city-based action is bottom-up action, and I think this is as much needed as top-down action. And I think that's one other reason why partners that have not joined yet should now join forces.
I completely concur with what you said. I would say because it covers a real gap, because it is a non-bureaucratic way of looking at helping those cities, and because it works.
I can only agree. So please come and join. Right? This is a good one. And you know, the cities will need a lot of help. We are being flooded and bombarded with requests in various ways and channels, and we could spend a hell of a lot more money on this. And we think that the return on that investment is very, very significant. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you all so much. You've all stolen my closing remarks, but it's really an excellent range of interventions today, a fantastic and very broad-ranging discussion, and thank you for all of that valuable and very insightful input. It would be great to continue to monitor and support progress, not only in recruiting cities in bringing forward additional ideas for projects to be supported through the fund, but also in looking at how cities are progressing with those supported projects. Please do visit, so it's citygapfund.org. There's a wealth of information there, from information on eligibility for the fund, the expression of interest process, to information about success stories, a set of frequently asked questions, and a knowledge hub that's really growing very rapidly with some very helpful and practical resources for cities that are looking to advance climate action. And there's also a mechanism on the site through a contact form to get in touch with the Secretariat teams. If you are interested in engaging with all of us in this very active and committed partnership, then please, if you are in the room there, speak to one of the team that are there on site or one of our panelists. Otherwise, please do get in touch using that contact form on the website after the event. As we've hopefully emphasized, there really is a gap in those earlier stages of project development and project preparation, and the fund is there to help overcome that and to really help cities advance on this ambitious climate action that we've heard so much about through the session. There will also be a second chance to hear, in that case, from some beneficiary cities and from the implementing agencies again, in an event that's moderated by the Global Covenant of Mayors Global Ambassador Gregor Robertson next week as part of COP26 on November the 11th between 5 p.m. and 6:30, and please follow along online or look out for details of that. But again, please do make the opportunity of visiting the website, again, citygapfund.org. Speak to somebody involved if you're interested in joining the partnership, or indeed becoming a donor and getting involved on the donor side of the fund. We're very excited about continuing to work with all of the partners to promote it and to use the fund and wider activity to drive forward and increase city ambition on climate action. A final thanks again to all of our panelists, to our audience there in the room, and to those of you following online. And please enjoy the rest of the day and do get in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you.